Alright, how to create and animate an opening gift box just like this in Adobe After Effects. I actually got a request for this video from someone who watched my other video, how to create and animate a 3D box in Adobe After Effects. So this is just really a variation of that using basically the same techniques. There's a few things that are a little bit different, but I'm just going to walk through the process of how to do this example. So I'm just going to go ahead and start a new composition. And then I'm going to start out by creating a shape layer. Alright, and in the shape layer, I'm going to add a rectangle, and I'm going to add a fill to that rectangle, just like that. And I'm going to go to the path and size it up to 500. Alright, so that's going to be equivalent to the first side of our gift box. And now what we need is the ribbon. So for that, I'm going to add another rectangle. And again, we're going to make the size, we're going to make the first one 100 for the size, and the second value we're going to make 500. Alright, and this is where this should actually be sitting on top. So I'm going to grab that rectangle path and move it above the first path, but it's still the same color, so we're going to need to change that color. But if I change this, it's going to change the color for everything within that shape layer, so I need to add a new fill. So that fill 2, I'm going to make that gold. It's good enough. And I'm going to go ahead and drag that to my second path. So there's our stripe, our ribbon. So that's all we need to get started with the first wall of the gift box. So I'm going to enable this, that it becomes a 3D layer, and we're just going to duplicate it for the other sides. So I'm going to go ahead and hit Command D to duplicate that layer. And just to be organized here, I'm going to hit Enter to rename that front. I'm going to rename the second one, enter again, to right. Alright, so for the right layer, I'm going to transform that by first going to 90 degrees on the y-axis. I'm going to add a camera here so we can see what we're doing a little bit better. I'm going to hit C to enable the camera tool and just turn that a little bit like so, and V to go back to my selection tool, and I'm actually just going to click and drag this so that I align with the corner of that front side. In order for this to work, you need to have snapping enabled right here. You saw how it snapped to the edge once it got there. It basically snaps whichever anchor point that your arrow selected closest to. Alright, so notice this ribbon is on the inside now. We can't see it, so I'm just going to go back to my Y rotation and start to crank that around, and that's going to be a -90, just going to even it out with the numbers there. So that's where we need to be. And then for our back layer, I'm going to duplicate the front again, enter, I'm going to call this back, and for that I'm just going to slide it back to snap to that back edge. Alright, perfect, and we can see that again that stripe is on the inside, needs to be on the outside, so I'm going to flip that again with the Y rotation, crank that around, it's going to be 180 degrees. And now I'm going to duplicate the right side, Command D again, and this is going to be left, and just going to send it over here. And once again we're going to rotate that so that we're at a +90. Alright, it looks like there's a top here, but there's not. What we need is a light so we can kind of see how a real environment would interact with this box. So layer, new light, looks good. So I'm going to reposition this a little bit, zoom out some, turn my point of interest that way, crank it up a bit, and that'll be fine for right now. Alright, so there's the beginnings of our box. So we're going to make the top and the bottom now. If I take my camera and drag it, you can see we just got a set of 4 walls for the box. So I'm going to select my front again, once again duplicate that with Command D, enter, so I can rename it when it lets me. I'm going to call this bottom. Open up my transform. We're going to rotate this on the x-axis to face it downward. Going to be right at 90. And then once again just going to drag it and align it just like that. Now if I take my camera tool, we can see the boxes in there. And then I'm going to hit that bottom layer and duplicate it, Command D again, enter to rename, and this will be top. I'm just going to drag this up to the top. Make sure we're aligned. Perfect. Alright, so I'm going to need to flip this so we see the ribbon on top with the X rotation. It's going to be an even -90, just like that. Alright, so notice that we need another stripe to go across this way. So in order to do that, I'm going to duplicate that ribbon, which is rectangle path 2 in this case, with Command D. So now I have rectangle path 3. But what I'm going to do is change the size here. So we go 500 and 100. And that gives us the cross path for that second ribbon. Also, since this is going to be our lid, it's going to be just a little bit wider than the rest of the box. So I'm going to close up the contents and go to transform, and we're just going to scale this up a couple of points. Probably 2 is fine. So while I'm working with this lid, I'm going to go ahead and hide the other layers so that I don't get messed up with trying to align the edges of the lid due to the rest of those layers trying to snap when they don't need to be. So I'm going to go ahead and hide right, left, front, and bottom, and back. Alright, so now we're just going to duplicate this a few times to get the edges of the lid. So Command D to duplicate for that first one, and we're going to call this lid front. And the way we're going to do that is rotate it on the X axis first, just to 0. And I'm going to align it with that front corner. Now I'm not going to need that second stripe for the side of the lid, so I'm going to open up contents and delete that third rectangle path, just like that. Hit my C tool to get my camera more level. So we're going to reshape this to be shorter. Obviously the lid's not going to cover the entire box, so before I do that, what I need to do is grab my pan behind tool, and I'm going to just drag that up to the top, hit V to get my selection tool, and now just shrink that up. Looks good. Alright, so now I'm just going to copy that with Command D, enter to rename. This will be lid right. And if I select that, drag it over to right here, now we can open transform. And if I hit Y, that gives me the pan behind tool again. I'm just going to slide that to the corner, and then we can Y rotate that to close it up. It's going to be an even -90. Perfect. And then C for the camera to drag around back. And we're going to duplicate lid right to make lid back. Actually, what's going to be easier, let's go ahead and make this lid left. And then we're just going to slide that straight back here, and then open it to flip it. Actually, I'm going to hit Y to get my pan behind tool again and just bring that back to the center, and then make that +90 instead of negative to flip that ribbon to the outside. And then for my front face of the box lid, I'm going to copy that again to make the back lid back, and we'll just slide this straight back. Make sure it lined up where we wanted it, and then camera to drag that around, and we'll see we need to flip it. And you can't see it because it's in the dark, the light's not hitting it, so I'm just going to hide this light for a second to reveal that. And now we're going to flip that around the y-axis 180 degrees to give us the stripe. Alright, so there is our lid. I'm going to turn that light back on, go back around front, and we're going to turn these layers back on. And there we've got our box with a lid. Alright, so the next thing we're going to do is create the ribbon. So in order to do this, I'm just going to grab the pen tool and get kind of creative. Not too creative, just enough for a basic ribbon. Maybe touch up that curve just a little bit. So just whatever works for you in this situation. feel free to add or shape however you want. So that's going to be the right side of our ribbon. So it created a new shape layer for us as I did that. So dropping that down, I'm not going to need the fill, so I'm just going to go ahead and delete that fill. And the stroke, I'm going to turn that light off for a second, which is right here. And I'm going to take that eyedropper and we're going to make it the same color as the rest of the ribbon. Alright, so what we need to do now is turn this into a 3D layer. Notice it lined up with the same orientation as the box. Not positioned where we need it yet, but lined up with the orientation. So now I am going to drop down my geometry options and work on the extrusion depth. Just crank that back. We don't see anything because our stroke needs some width. We're just going to crank that up to, say, 1. Alright, and that depth, I'm just going to bring it up a little bit more. And we'll reposition this before we get it exactly matched to the rest of the ribbon. So I'm going to go back to my V tool, actually see for the camera, and we can see it kind of sitting inside the box there. To reposition that, I'm going to just bring that up, and we're going to go to not active camera, but we want to see the top view of this box. So I'm going to push our Z-axis back, and we'll see exactly how thick this ribbon needs to be with our extrusion depth. That looks about like it's going to match up. I'm going to pull it out just to get a better perspective. Maybe just a little less. Could 100 be the magic number? Perfect. We'll take it. I'm going to hit Y for my pan behind tool just to move that anchor point to the center. Perfect. Alright, and I'm going to go ahead and move that to the center like so, and I'm going to come back to active camera so we can see it there. It looks a little bit too big to me, so we're going to size that down. I'm going to go back to my front view so we can see that's a little high. So here I just adjust the ribbon to make sure it looks like it's sitting on top of the lid as close as possible without intersecting the lid. Then back to active camera, and we're going to turn this light back on to give us the perspective we need. I feel like that's looking a little too thick. So I'm going to drop over my contents and the stroke, see if we can make that 0.25. Yeah, that'll work. Alright, so to make the second half of this ribbon, we're just going to Command D to duplicate, and we'll name that bow left. And this is our bow right. So with our left side of the bow, we're going to transform that simply with a Y rotation. Just swing it around 180 degrees. And there we have it. Shift forward slash to fit to view. Yeah, so that's our basic box with the ribbon. Alright, for the lid animation, what we're going to want to do is move the anchor point of this lid. I'm going to hit the Y for my pan behind tool and just slide that straight back to right there. And before we do any animating, we're going to want to parent. So we're going to highlight bow right and left, and then our lid parts to the box top, or the lid top. So now that those are highlighted, I'm just going to grab this pick whip and drag it to top. Now everything we do to animate the top will be reflected in the movement of the rest of the pieces of this lid. I'm going to back that camera view out a little bit and also come down with that box just a tad. Alright, so to animate this, I'm going to be working with the top. We're going to back our playhead up to the beginning, and under transform, I'm going to work with the X rotation. I'm just going to move it so you can see what will be going on here. Oh, looks like I forgot to enable one of the sides of my box there. The back. There we go. Alright, yeah, so that X rotation is our property. Just going to make that -90 to start where it was. And we're going to add a keyframe right there. Come out a little bit. And then we're going to open it. Now notice as it opens, you see a piece of the back of the lid sticking through the box. So we need to fix that by working with our position of that lid. So I'm going to keyframe it right here. Hold shift to go to my second keyframe. And then there's where we're going to move it back with that last property on the position. So we can see if we stop it there, it's still a problem. Looks like it's good there. I'm just going to inch this one by one so we don't go farther than we have to. 568 looks like it should do it, so we'll just drag through this to see if at any point that peeks through when it shouldn't. Right there, looks like it does. Going to make another keyframe here and push that back early. Couple of points. Coming back through. Looks like that ought to do it. Make sure our front lines up. We're not having any front pieces poke through. Let's do a quick render. Looks like that'll work. Go ahead and set the composition end right about here by hitting in, so it would just loop through that. Let's make it a little more fluid. I like to interpolate those keyframes with some easy ease. Should do it, and that'll have to re-render. Looks like that has affected our animation slightly. Yeah, we see a piece of the box poking through right there. It looks like it's backing up sooner than it should be, so I'm just going to bring this keyframe of position forward so we don't get any position animation until we need it. Again, right there coming through, we don't need that. Move that keyframe forward a little bit more. Go ahead and render that, and you'll just have to play with this a little bit if you see any quirks like that, obviously, depending on your specific projects. So right there, we've got our back peeking through. If I drag this keyframe up a little bit, that should take care of that. I want to move this forward a little sooner. Let's see if that takes care of it. Okay. And we'll do a full render to make sure that looks good all the way through. Alright, now that'll play from the beginning. Perfect. Our gift box with an opening lid looks alright. I think the scene looks a little bit dark. This is where we just touch it up a little bit, but that's basically how it all works. Go ahead and hit save for that. I'm going to add another light to make this a little bit brighter. Back out. I'm going to bring that to the top. Go forward a little bit, and just, this will be sort of a top-down light. Yeah, it's a little better. Alright, so what would make this even better is a little bit of camera movement. So with our camera, I'm going to drop a keyframe on point of interest and position and hit that C tool to spin this over here. You know what, I think I'm going to add one more light, sort of a backlight. Bring that up over a little bit, push it back, come over that way a little bit more, and we're going to change that point of interest like so. Maybe come a little bit higher up. Yeah, so we can have a little bit more light on that gift box. It's a happy occasion, opening a gift. We want to make sure we have enough light. Everybody sees everything they need to. Alright, so that's positioned kind of at an angle. A good place to start with the camera. We've got our keyframes there. I'm going to hit C to get my camera tool back and move this just a bit more. Cycle down to push that to the right just a bit. Maybe a bit back. Alright, that looks good. I'm going to come forward as we open the box. Lids up. We'll stop the animation maybe right here with a couple of more keyframes. And I'm going to go back to this tool, and we're just going to spin that view. And move the direction a bit. Down and then to the left. Maybe come up a bit. Let's see how that scrolls through. Alright, we'll render it out. Lid starts to open. We come in for a close view as it does. And it's at its peak with the lid all the way open. And we see it from start to finish. So there you go. That's how you do that completely in After Effects. If you wanted to say, get more creative with the box wrapping, for example, you could create those layers in Adobe Illustrator, put whatever texturing or imagery on them that you wanted, and then bring those over to After Effects. You could even try this with JPEG layers, with picture layers. A lot of freedom. I just wanted to show entirely in After Effects how to make this happen. So hopefully that's helpful. That's one way to do this. It would probably be a different story in some actual 3D software. But that's, again, a request that I got based on creating a box from those 2D layers in After Effects to kind of create a 3D object. So that's how to do that with opening a gift box. Hopefully that's helpful. Thanks.